Hi, my name is Joyce Ryder. I'm the Vice President of the Boys and Girls Club of the Pikes Peak region. I want to thank all of you guys for taking time to join us this evening and be on the call in hopes to make a change and a difference in our world. Welcome back to those of you that have been joining us every month, and welcome to any new attendees. First off, I'd like to say thank you to USAA for their commitment to advancing racial equity and awarding us a grant that has allowed us to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion to create conversations that count, to offer to our club members and to our community. So before we jump in, I'd like to take a moment to introduce a couple of people. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Regina Lewis. She is well known as a consulting partner, international speaker, virtual moderator, and CEO of Regina Speaking LLC. Dr. Lewis's proven specialty is leadership, professional excellence, cultural inclusion, entrepreneurship, executive coaching, strategic development, and executive public speaking coaching. Regina holds a doctorate in educational leadership, research and policy, Master's of Arts in Communication, a Bachelor of Arts in Communication, and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. Regina's work in the area of diversity and inclusion has become an award-winning program. With nothing more to say, I'd like to introduce Dr. Regina Lewis.
And again, thank you all for being here. I am excited about introducing our next guest and get him started. So with us tonight is Erick Groskopf. And Erick was born and raised in Los Angeles, California before moving here to Colorado Springs in 1996. He graduated from St. Mary's High School in 2004. I wonder if there's any St. Mary's people here tonight. My sister went to St. Mary's. And then he studied criminal justice at the University of Colorado here in Colorado Springs and graduated with his bachelor's in 2010. Erick also minored in theater. That's something that that's become a passion of his on his free time. He began working with Colorado Springs Teen Court as an intern before graduating in May 2010. So keep that in mind. You can do internships. You can volunteer your time. You never know, it might lead you into a job. After volunteering all summer, he was eventually hired on as program assistant. Over 10 years later, he is currently the volunteer operations director and is responsible for coordinating all teen court volunteers, which includes over 100 youth alone, in addition to dozens of community members, attorneys, and judges. In addition to people wrangling and staying in contact with all the volunteers, he is constantly seeing to the needs of the hundreds of defendants and their parents coming through teen court program. Erick is also a proud sci-fi geek, a devout Hufflepuff, and has been known to partake in karaoke on certain occasions. I wonder if tonight's one of those occasions. But without further, he says, no way. But without further ado, I introduce to you, Erick.
Well, thank you so much, Regina. I honestly feel like I sound boring in comparison after that intro of yours. So thank you so much for introducing me. And thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for being here tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit more about the Teen Court program. Like Regina was saying, I've been doing this for about 11 years now, and I did start as an intern, finished up my bachelor's, got addicted to the work, got addicted to working with these kids and seeing them change and getting to meet the wonderful volunteers who truly run this program. I always tell people, I'm not the one who runs this program. I just wrangle the people who do. And with that, I see a few of the people I have wrangled over the last few years that are here with us tonight, because I wanted to invite them to share their experiences and why they volunteer with us. So if I could have, I guess in this order, could I have Alex Choi, Lydia Miller, Alex Wynn Lopez, and Andrew King briefly introduce themselves and say how long they've volunteered with Teen Court and where they are now, if they're currently here still volunteering, or if they've moved off to college, which some of them have. So
my introduction is definitely going to sound boring. My name is Alex Choi. I'm a senior this year. I go to high school here at Liberty High School in Colorado Springs, and I've been volunteering with Teen Court for for near about 4 years right now.
All right, I guess it's my turn. Hi, everyone. My name is Lydia Miller. I am a freshman at George Washington University. I graduated last year from Discovery Canyon campus in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I was volunteering with Eric in the teen court since my freshman year of high school. So that was about 5 years. And obviously I'm in college now, so it really did help me a long way. And I'm truly looking forward to sharing that experience with you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Lopez. I am a junior at the University of Denver. I graduated in 2019 from Rampart High School in Colorado Springs. I volunteered with Eric for about 2 years as a teen volunteer, then continued for about another summer and a half as an adult case manager. And I'm looking forward to also sharing my experience with you tonight.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew King. I've been a case manager in the teen court program for approximately a year. I'm currently at UCCS in the graduate program in the Master's in Public Administration program at UCCS, and I'm happy to be here and to share my experience as well. It's been a great year at teen court. So thank you.
Thank you all once again for joining me tonight. I gotta say that's the first time I've sent an invitation to join my volunteers at such an odd hour and such a, I guess this is more normal now of a venue than it was last year. So I'm gonna invite them to share their experiences as we go through this presentation. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick here and we'll just get right into this presentation. So, okay. All right, can everybody see that? Oh, good. I did do it right. That was success. Okay, so for 27 years since 1994 here in Colorado Springs, our organization was known as Colorado Springs Teen Court. And we are an independently owned and operated nonprofit organization. We are not officially part of the court or the state or the city. However, we obviously work along with municipal court here in Colorado Springs. And our program is basically an alternative sentencing program for first-time misdemeanor offenders between the ages of 10 and 19 years old. So over the last 2 years, though, our staff and our board members, we were talking about ways that we could try to branch out from just the kids that we see that are in the court system. So as of May 1st of this year, over the last 2 years, a lot of work went into it. As an organization, we have since rebranded and we are now known as Forge Evolution because we are trying to branch out more into the realm of prevention and intervention and work with youth that aren't just the kids that are ticketed or about to be ticketed in the court system, but we want to develop a drop-in program that kids can opt into, that they don't feel like they're being forced to attend, kind of like a court-ordered class. And that will eventually be the Forge program that we are hoping to launch in mid to end October of this year. And that'll be spread out across several weeks, and each class will cover a different topic. We're gonna partner with a lot of agencies around this great community that we live in here. And we're just gonna give these kids a place where they can come and hang out and feel accepted and feel safe and have fun and also maybe learn something in the process. So, but for the purposes of tonight's presentation, I'm going to focus on the teen court program side of this. So the teen court program has not changed. It is still a vital pillar program under this new Forge Evolution umbrella. So with the teen court program, what we're going to be covering tonight is obviously who we are, and we're going to be talking about restorative practices and restorative justice. We're going to talk about the youth that we serve in the program and the types of sentencing hearings and sentencing options that we offer our youth and the opportunities they have to go through some classes and mentoring programs so that they can learn from, you know, their mistake that brought them to the court system initially, but eventually go forth and be wonderful and become the next future leaders of our community. We're going to talk a little bit more about those new opportunities. I'm going to have my wonderful volunteers chime in and share some of their experiences here, because like I said, they're the ones that run the program. I just wrangle them. And then there's a brief little 2-minute video at the end, story of one of our kids. And then we'll open it up for some Q&A time. So if you think of something as I'm going through this that you would like to ask, I would be more than happy to answer that. But I'm just, for the time being, I'm just going to ask you to write it down. And then when we get to the end of the presentation here, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. All right. So like I was saying, we've been Colorado Springs Teen Court since 1994. And it's still very much alive and kicking as far as the Teen Court program. And we are still developing that new Forge program, and we're excited to see, you know, more youth that we can serve while still doing what we do best, which is the Teen Court program. It was founded back in 1994 because there were some members of the El Paso County Bar Auxiliary, some people from School District 11, and other community members that were trying to address how to handle juvenile crime in Colorado Springs, because that traditional punishment, retribution-based approach to these teenage offenders that are between 10 and 19, that approach is not very effective on them. But when you take it and you apply it through a restorative justice lens, that is where you can really see these kids actually learning something from their decisions and ultimately not reoffending, which thankfully most of them don't after coming through our program. So what are restorative practices? So restorative practices very much focus on the community. It's not just the kid is in front of a judge, here's your standard sentence for shoplifting. That approach does not work with these kids. So restorative practices fosters a culture that it elevates dialogue and the values of relationships and sitting down and having those conversations face to face with people and making that connection. And also changing, you know, how zero tolerance is handled in schools and at home. So people in the community come together to obviously identify what harm was caused. Why are we here? What happened? What was the offense? What was the issue that brought us here? What are we trying to resolve? We also identify the needs of everyone involved, because everyone comes into this either as the offender who got a ticket for fighting at school, but also that offender's parents, also the victim of that case, also the teacher that intervened during that fight, and also, you know, the community as a whole, because these things have more long-term widespread effects than a lot of the kids realize at first. You know, and then in restorative practices, we also want to identify the steps to repair the harm. What needs to be done now? How can we make this right? And we ultimately, the whole time we have them in our program, we support them to help them just become more productive, smarter, wiser members of society. You know, this is our next generation of the future leaders of this community. And, you know, we're all human, we all make mistakes, but it's not about, you know, how many times you get knocked down. It's about how often you get back up again and you learn from that and you do better from that. So with restorative practices, it obviously addresses the needs of the school, the community, the victim involved. These needs can be both behavioral or individual. Maybe there's some long-term conflict that's been festering for far too long between two kids or a group of kids. I've seen a lot of like fights and assaults and harassment cases. The boy fights, they're usually over it pretty fast. The girl fights can get nasty, the high school girl fights, but those middle school girl fights, oh my goodness, the middle school girl fights, there's so much conflict there. But they just need to address those needs and what they need for themselves. So restorative practices also help build those healthy relationships between the educators and the students. It builds stronger relationships, which by doing that, that can stop some of this behavior before it even starts. Obviously, what we do through restorative practices also reduces and prevents, you know, that harmful behavior, but it is not necessarily the easy way out, as we'll see when we get into some of the sentencing options we offer. Along with that, restorative practices focus on repairing the harm and restoring those positive relationships. And that's what's ultimately going to cause that long-term change for the better. And then finally, ultimately, we want the conflict resolved. And we want these individuals involved and these groups of individuals to be accountable, to learn how to take that accountability, but at a level that actually matters to them. So like I said, with restorative practices, one of the big main focuses is the victim. If the victim is another kid, if the victim is the school, if the victim is a store that was shoplifted from, if the victim was a parent or whatever it may be. We also want to reconnect that offender, that student, with their community and bring them all together to have that conversation, to open that dialogue, communicate in a healthy manner, and to resolve any conflict that's been there, to repair the harm that was done and restore those positive relationships. So just a couple facts about, this was our 2019-2020 year, which kind of came to a screeching halt, as did the rest of the world because of this little thing that's been going around. But in the 1920 year, of the cases we saw, about half of them were ticketed into municipal court. They were ticketed with a misdemeanor. That could be shoplifting or theft or fighting or marijuana or alcohol, trespassing, fireworks, all kinds of fun stuff that we see here. These are the types of cases we see listed there on the bottom. And if they're eligible for our program, they receive what's called a 6-month deferred sentence through municipal court. So that means they plead guilty to their charge. So already before they're even being sentenced, they're taking some of that accountability. They're owning up to what they did. And then they receive this 6-month deferred sentence, which basically means, okay, you're going to go to the teen court program for your sentencing. As long as you finish whatever sentence you get, that guilty plea for shoplifting, for marijuana, for fighting, whatever it is, will be taken off of your record in 6 months. Your charge will be dismissed, and it will ultimately be sealed and expunged off of their records. So they don't have this dumb decision, this impulse decision, this mistake they made as a young person. Once it's expunged off their record, they don't have it following them around for the rest of their lives anymore. So like I said, eligible cases, they're 10 to 19 years old. If they're eligible, they receive that 6-month deferred sentence, and eventually the guilty plea is dropped and then eventually ultimately taken off their record. So about half the cases we see, about 150 to 200 of those cases, are directly from municipal court. But about 10, 11 years ago, we started taking direct referrals from local middle schools and high schools. So we developed what we call our pre-adjudication or pre-ticket program, which the school resource officers and a lot of the administrations around town, they were all about this. So basically, it's the same age range of kids that we normally see. We give them all a 3-month due date to finish their sentence. And if they complete the sentence they receive from our student volunteers, there is no official charge filed at all. So that kid does not have a ticket or a record at all, as long as they complete everything. They come through the same sentencing hearing process. They get sentenced to the same classes and mentoring programs. So it's kind of like these kids are being given like a double second chance. I just had one deputy call me earlier today who said he had a kid whose family, the parents in particular, had a lot of run-ins with the police, and he didn't want to ticket this kid for what would have been either vandalism or damage to property. So he asked if he could refer him to us. Apparently this young man just did one of those new TikTok challenges that are going around and decided to break a soap dispenser off the bathroom at his school. So that officer did not want to ticket that kid, throw his whole family into the court system, and it would just cause ultimately more stress for them. So he just referred him to us. So he's going to be in our program, and as long as he finishes, he won't get a ticket at all. And about the other half of our cases, about 100 to 150 of those cases are those pre-adjudication cases. So when we get a case, we have to determine, okay, what's the best route for these kids to be sentenced at? Most of our kids come through a process that are called peer panels. And I am going to turn it over to my case manager, Andrew King, and my student volunteer, Alex Choi, to talk about real quick what a typical peer panel looks like and what the process is in a nutshell, if you gentlemen would be so kind.
Yes, Eric. So basically for a peer panel for in my position as a case manager is where I oversee the documents and I ensure that the volunteers, the student volunteers and the peer panelists are on the right track, that they're accomplishing the goal in mind and the design of the peer panel process. With that in mind, I just try to I empower them to make the right decision in terms of the sentencing limitations and options, and to really ask the right questions and really be supportive and show that we're trying to help the defendants and really teach them how to be pro-social and act on those good behavior sets. Other than that, I would like if a student volunteer can really talk about their role, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. So just to give kind of an overview of what peer panels are, as a student volunteer, I get basically a little bit of packet, which is information about the offense, what happened. So it kind of gives us an idea. And what happens is we get the student, the defendant, and we bring in his or her guardian, and we bring them in, and we ask the guardian to step out, and we ask the defendant some questions about the case. This is mainly to figure out, why they did it, what they want, what we're thinking about at the time, and how they were planning to fix it, the solution that they want to find. And oftentimes we'll find that as a peer, since we are around their age, I think they find it a lot more comfortable to talk to us rather than adults. So I see a lot of them open up a lot more than I would think with other adults. And so we find it a lot easier to communicate with them that way. And so that way we're able to prepare a proper program for them, usually through classes and through community service. And so this process is whole, just not only are we getting to know the offense, but it's more of what we think is best for the defendant while getting to know them during this process.
Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing both of that. So the lesser offenses, the younger defendants, actually most of the cases we see go through the peer panel process. That's really what the heart of the teen court program is, because we very much believe in wanting to get to know the kid as a whole person and not just another statistic being processed through the system. This is a young man or a young woman who made a mistake and now they're dealing with the consequences. And so we bring in our student volunteers to relate to them because they are their literal actual teen peers. And that's one of the reasons that this program is so effective, is because all of the sentencing for all of our defendants is given by our student volunteers. Now, the more serious cases we see, older defendants, the higher level offenses, for example, like a shoplifting or a theft case under $50, that would be a peer panel. But the young lady who was running her own shoplifting school and charging her friends $20 each and taking them on field trips to the Citadel Mall to show them how to shoplift better, they made off with $1,100 worth of the mall. So all four of them, the ringleader and her three pupils, they were all sentenced on what's called a teen court trial. Now, again, at this point, they've already either pled guilty or they've admitted guilt to be in the program. And the purpose of a teen court trial is it is just another more formal type of sentencing hearing. And I'm going to have Lydia Miller and Alex Wynn Lopez, who were student attorneys of mine for a very long time and some of the best attorneys that I had, talk a little bit more about what a teen court trial looks like from both the defense and the prosecution side. So I'm going to turn it over to Lydia first.
Yes, I definitely did love doing trials, much more official. So I was a defense first year. That means that I was in charge of the case on the defense side. There was the first chair and the second chair. So we were mimicking like an actual trial. Like the week before the trial, Eric would send over about 8 to 9 pages of documents that you would have to like look over. And that included transcripts, records, school records, the police report, all of those kind of informations that we would need to know when we're in court. Same thing, like I'm sure that the other attorney will also talk about, is the same thing the prosecution got. On the defense side, I switched from prosecutor to defense because after doing a couple trials as a prosecutor, the mentor attorney who we get as peer panels get someone as a mentor, and we get like an actual attorney who very graciously volunteers the time and actually teaches us all of the kind of the tricks and tips about how to kind of convince the jury to kind of go to your side. Of course, as Erick already mentioned, the person already pleaded guilty, but we're still trying to, like on the defense side, get them the less possible volunteer hours and kind of like convince everyone what we think is right. So personally for me, when I talk to, we're gonna call them the client, the juvenile, basically, I had to talk to their parents. I called them before the trial. I talked to them, figured out like what they're feeling, what they want the outcome to be. But my biggest goal was kind of like showing the person as more than just a number, because that's kind of like all that teen court is truly about, is that I got to hear so many different stories about some people just honestly made a mistake and some people were truly going down the wrong path. And I took it on as kind of like my responsibility to make sure that they do stay on the right path. So that is kind of like my defense side of it. If you want to jump in and do the prosecutor side.
For sure. Thanks, Lydia. So the prosecution side, it's a little different than what you see in, say, Law and Order. Obviously they've already pled guilty, and it's not my job to nail them to the wall and get them or get anything put on their record. That's not my job. My job as a prosecutor is to be kind of the heavier hand, be the person who holds this individual accountable for their for what they did and ensure that they learn their lesson. So like Lydia said, we are able to interact with real attorneys who volunteer their time to work with us. I've worked with Gordon Hoyser, you know, the guy on TV. I've worked with him. I've worked with a bunch of people from other law firms throughout all of Colorado Springs. And what happens is that as a prosecutor, I ask for the harsher sentence because I'm looking for certain classes which will help these students learn a lesson, whether it be a class specific to teaching these students to not the impact of shoplifting beyond just the fact that you can't sell that object back in the store again. The fact that prices in the rest of the store go up as a result of that defendant stealing something from that store. Other classes that work on developing life skills like interview skills, resume building, that sort of thing. Various different classes which are tailored specifically to each different type of offense and to an appropriate age level depending on the age of the defendant. At the end of all that, the prosecution and defense, both of our goals, and this I tell in every one of my closing statements, is that the goal is not to punish these students, it's to help them learn their lesson. Both the prosecution and the defense are there for that kid. We would not be volunteering our time as either prosecutors or defense attorneys if we did not think that these kids could change. And as a result, a lot of these kids end up turning their lives around for the better.
Thank you for sharing all of that, Alex. And can I just say, I'm so proud of both of you that you're off in college right now and you're doing the thing, but I'm so mad that you left me here and now you're in college, but I'm still proud of you. So anyway, once they're sentenced to a variety of programming that we offer. Some of them are offense specific, but these are all, again, based around those restorative practices, based around having that dialogue, having that conversation, and not screaming and yelling and demeaning or making these kids feel any less, valued than, they're human beings too. So for all of our shoplifters, for example, they go to a class that we call a community impact panel. When I first started here 11 years ago, we had so many shoplifting cases. That was the #1 juvenile crime in Colorado Springs. And the thing with that is initially these kids don't really see that as a crime. They see it kind of like a victimless crime. It's like, well, you know, Walmart's not going to miss me going in and stealing 50 bucks here and there. But then you got to factor in how many Walmarts are in Colorado Springs alone. Now, how many people woke up today and had that same thought process and went into one of those Walmarts? Suddenly, that is a huge chunk of money. Those stores, those businesses have to hire people full-time to catch these shoplifters. They have to install security cameras. And like Alex was saying, if the merchandise is damaged or like the package is ripped open, they can't resell that. So they have to eat the cost on that. So we bring in these people who work in security and loss prevention, store managers, retail. They come in and talk about the true effects of shoplifting and what that does to the store, to the employees, but ultimately to the community as a whole, because the prices are going to go up and then we are going to have to pay for more people shoplifting in any given year. Whereas I would much rather have that money for myself to do, you know, what I please with. So in the 1920 fiscal year, we had 39 kids come through for shoplifting who participated in this community impact panel, and 97% of them stated that they will never shoplift again. So this, you know, tells us that they, you know, they've learned from the class and they understand the consequences better, and they especially understand how many people are truly getting affected by this and not just themselves. We also see a lot of alcohol and a lot of marijuana cases. We are in Colorado, and I know, you know, we've become a more progressive state over the last couple of years. So we see a lot of kids who come through with marijuana offenses. There is no good or bad when it comes to marijuana anymore with these kids. It is a non-entity to a lot of these kids. A lot of these kids, they use with their parents. They all smoke as a family in the evening. Now, when you're of age and you're old enough to either go to a liquor store or go and buy marijuana recreationally, or if you have a red card, a medical marijuana card, that is your business to do on your time. But when you're 10 or when you're 13 and you're in school and you start using at a young age and you think it's not a big deal then, it's really going to take its toll on you by the time you're old enough to graduate high school. So all of our marijuana, paraphernalia, and alcohol cases go through our alcohol drug awareness panel for teens. We call it ADAPT. The first class, they sit down with a police officer who works at one of the local high schools here in town. He's a school resource officer. And he talks about the legal ramifications of what it's like to have a drug or alcohol conviction on your record permanently and how it affects so many things, stuff that I never even considered. So we started that class back in about 2009. And then in 2012, we integrated in a state of Colorado pilot project to address this growing problem of marijuana use among adolescents here in the state of Colorado. So then we created our drug alcohol intervention program to kind of get more of those cases from the schools. A lot of them came through as those pre-adjudication cases. So they have the first class that's an open and honest forum with that police officer. And then they get to ask him questions, and he's also a human being too. So he shares, you know, stories from when he was a naughty teenager doing what so many teenagers do at that age, because we're all human, right? So they sit down with him for the first class, and they, you know, end up ultimately having a greater understanding and appreciation of the consequences for continued use. The second class, they come back, same group, and they watch a short documentary that we made of one of our kids who came through the teen court program a few years ago. I believe we had her for fighting, but in the 6 months that we had her, she started dating the wrong guy. She ended up getting trafficked to another state. She ended up getting kidnapped, and she almost lost her life. And in the process, she got addicted to meth. She eventually made her way back to Colorado and came to us and you know, wanted help, wanted to get clean, and wanted to finish her sentence. And thankfully she did. She is healthy and married with a baby of her own now. But once she finished the program and she got clean, she approached us and said, is there something I can do for you guys to help the next kid? Because I never in my wildest dreams thought I would turn into, you know, quote, one of those people, you know what I mean? And her way of giving back was just literally sharing her story. So this documentary the kids watch, they interview the young lady, they interview her boyfriend, and they interview her mom. And they sit around and have a conversation about that. And most of these kids can relate to where she was at that point in time. So we also have all of our drug and alcohol offenders. We have them take UAs, which stand for urinalysis. That's a random drug test throughout the time they're in our program, because we want them to stay clean and we want them to be clear-headed while they're coming back, for their classes and mentoring programs and their community service. We don't want them to just kind of be floating through life in a haze and kind of missing what's going on around them. So in the 1920 year, we had 86 youth attend this class. 87% of them reported that they learned more about how harmful marijuana can be at a young age. And then ultimately 91% of them said they were less likely to use after coming through this class. And again, once you're old enough, it's your choice, it's your responsibility. But until then, we always tell them, it's like, focus on finishing high school, focus in on getting that job, and then what you choose to do, because it's going to come down to them making a choice. That's their business once they leave the program, hopefully smarter, wiser individuals. A few years ago, we decided that we realized that a lot of the kids in our programs were all lacking these basic skills that they needed to become self-sufficient. Most of these were high school students, and a lot of them didn't really have any educational goals. They didn't really have any thoughts of future careers or anything like that. And as with a lot of teenagers, they lacked a lot of that self-esteem and that confidence. So, we believe every youth has the opportunity to become a leader in their community. I've seen it happen. I've been doing this for 11 years. I've seen it happen multiple times. And they deserve that opportunity regardless of whatever background they came from. So using some best practices and some research, we developed our life skills mentoring program, which this class is required for any kids in our program that are currently in high school. So we have all of our freshmen and sophomores complete what we call basic life skills. And that is the first 2 classes. And then we have all of our juniors and seniors complete what's called advanced life skills. So they take all 4 sessions. This program, it focuses on helping them learn how to set goals, short-term and long-term goals. It helps them to communicate more effectively in a healthy manner. We talk about bullying. We talk about suicide prevention. We talk about getting yourself out of a dangerous situation. We also teach them basic banking, basic money management. We teach them the difference between a savings account and a checking account and a credit card and a debit card. I always have to tell them that credit card is not a magical piece of plastic with endless money. Although if someone finds one of those, they need to bring it to me so I can see if it works first. But anyway, the 3rd and 4th classes that we have the advanced kids complete go more into budgeting and managing your money. They learn how to write proper resumes. They go through a whole class about job searching and professional manner and dress. And then the last part of the last class, we actually have them sit down and practice doing mock job interviews with volunteers from the community. So they learn a lot of skills in this class. So after these kids finish this class, 89% of them reported that they seem more personally stable. They're a little less afraid to live on their own. 94% of them are more enthusiastic about finding a career and finding a job. And 89% of them said that, they feel more motivated and they've increased their work ethic and raised the bar for job searching for youth in our community. Now, there's some kids who kind of need a little bit more of a wake-up call. So we send them to what we call our Straight Talk class. Now, this class, in 1920, we had 131 kids go through this class. It's presented by 2 guest speakers. The first class is a police officer. He was on the gang unit here with the CSPD for a number of years. He was also a special agent with the DEA task force, but he decided he liked being on the streets so much, he came back to the police department here. He lost both of his parents when he was very young, and he had a very rough upbringing. He helped found a gang down in Widefield, and he used to be a very naughty young man. He got himself into his fair amount of trouble, but he barely graduated high school, ultimately turned his life around and became a police officer. So his way of paying it forward and giving back is coming back and sharing his story with these kids and talking about choices and decision making and learning from their mistakes so they don't end up, in the correctional system or worse. The second class is actually facilitated by an ex-convict who was a gang member, who did do time in the juvenile and the adult correctional systems. And he basically does the same thing the police officer in the first session does. He shares his story with them because he doesn't want them to make the choices that he made. And he ended up losing out on 7 years of his life because he was locked up in a federal prison that he can't get back. And, you know, he always talks to the kids about, is this really worth it? What you're doing now, these people that are your so-called friends, are they really building you up? Or are they the ones you're always with when you're getting in trouble? And about 76% of the kids who take this class indicated they had a better awareness of how their criminal behavior is going to impact their lives, their families' lives, and their futures. A couple years ago, we started a class called You Knit, where, yes, the kids will learn how to knit something. So we had an overwhelming number of students who said that the favorite part of this class was getting to sit down and just have a conversation with someone. So this class is run by a lot of our adult volunteers. They come in and they teach these kids how to knit. And while they're sitting there knitting, they're actually relaxing their brains. They're actually sitting there, they're getting relaxed. And with that, they start opening up about everything. They start talking to these volunteers about everything. And they're also learning a new skill. And they said the best part was being able to leave this class holding something in their hands that they made. And in 1920, we had 30 kids participate in that class, and 93% of them said they felt calm and they wanted to continue this. So every kid's sentence is going to include some number of community service hours because we want to reconnect them with their community. We have a great community that we all live in, and we send them out to nonprofit organizations throughout Colorado Springs. Occasionally, some of them will also be sentenced to write an apology letter or a reflective essay that they could learn from. Because this goes back into that restorative practices piece of including the victim and taking accountability and learning from your mistakes. And then we do occasionally sentence some of our kids to outside agency classes through what's called experiential coaching programs. So in 1920, we had more than half of the kids we saw that year were sentenced to complete one of these outside classes. There's an agency called Heinz Feet Counseling. They teach a cooking class. They teach a pen turning class for our kids where they start with a block of wood. They learn how to use the machinery, and they get to design and fashion themselves a real actual functioning pen at the end of it. And that class focuses on learning a new skill, working on a team, learning how to communicate more effectively, and seeing something through from beginning to end and leaving with that finished product. D1 training, they offer a class that's built around physical fitness and sports because we do see some kids that are athletically inclined. And that class also focuses on building self-esteem and establishing that confidence that these kids need at this age. And there's another agency called Counseling Couch. They offer a martial arts program for some of our kids, for those kids that might have some anger issues, that may have trouble addressing authority, and that just might need an outlet to kind of take out some of that frustration you know, of daily life. So, and this is just what some of the kids have said from the outside classes. With teen court being the very flexible model that it is, we get a little more leeway as far as being able to sentence some kids to do creative art projects. I'm talking like art projects, rap songs, poems, photography projects, sculptures. If there's something they're good at and we can give them a positive outlet to use that skill and create something wonderful, like the stuff we have in our office right now. Like that house, that 15-year-old boy wanted to be an architect, and that thing is legit the size of a dollhouse. I was here the day he turned that in, and it's incredible what these kids do when they apply themselves. So with the impact, like I said, we see about 300 to 400 youth a year. About 91% of those kids successfully finish their sentence. And of those 300 to 400 youth, over 130 of them weren't ticketed. They were referred directly from the schools. And because our program is focused on restorative justice, the recidivism or reoffense rate for kids who come through the teen court program is only at 7%. You compare that to the traditional court system that focuses on punishment and retribution, the reoffense rate for those kids in the traditional court system is between 40 and 50%. I know a while ago, my boss did some research and found this study with the Los Angeles Unified School District. Once they implemented restorative practices in their schools, which a lot more schools are doing these days, there was a 92% decrease in the number of days that were lost to suspensions. So they're hoping to do more of that. I know we've been doing a lot of that here in Colorado Springs, because with those restorative practices, it allows for more effective teaching, a better learning environment, communication improves. There's less conflict because people are talking, they're communicating with one another. And they're also taking accountability. They have a greater sense of acceptance and responsibility. And it's an approach that's all focused on a solution, and the solution works. And these are just a few facts. I don't know how big you can see these on here about the program. A lot of it I've already kind of touched on. The big one on this one, though, is this one down here on the bottom right. So that's the average total cost to send a kid through the teen court program. You compare that to incarcerating a juvenile in Colorado, that costs $161 a day, which in 6 months is over $28,000, almost $29,000. So it's a more effective, much less expensive route for these kids to come through the court system and then ultimately go forth and be wonderful without criminal records. And I know this one is also really hard to see on here. I realized that when I pulled it up on my screen. So we see about half and half as far as how many cases are young males and young females. It's literally split almost down the middle. 1920, we saw violent offenses more than we saw anything else. We saw a lot of fighting, assault, and harassment cases, but we still see, those theft cases, those alcohol, marijuana cases. And yeah, our volunteers donated over 5,000 hours of their time to be here for our hearings and our classes, at our peer panels, at our trials. Like I said, they're the ones that run the program. This program would cease to exist if it wasn't for them. So these are just some things that the kids have said over the years after they finish. We have them do some exit evaluations. And a lot of them, when they first start, they're like, oh, I'm gonna hate this. But they start coming, they start making those connections, they start opening up to each other, and they start learning about their actions having consequences. They really do get more out of it than they realize. So, and this we already kind of talked about with the Forge program. We're trying to get more into the intervention and prevention realm and promoting those protective factors of building resiliency and building empathy. So, all right. And then I have this quick little 2-minute video, and then we'll open it up for questions.
I'm Bianca and I went through teen court in 2019. At the beginning of the summer, I really started getting into smoking weed. So I was in Spanish class and I had a lot of things on me, and I was passing it to a friend, and I'm pretty sure someone saw me and told the administration, and I got called up and searched. The bad friends that I made at my current school were really encouraging me to smoke and do drugs like that and drink and sneak out and party. I just fell under the influence of it because I was at a new school and I just wanted to be liked and fit in because I felt like I didn't have anyone else. It was a big mess because I already deteriorated my parents' trust from last year even too. And when they came, there was so much anger and sadness in their eyes, and I could just see it, and I was really sad and I didn't know how I could fix things. Even when I would go to school, they'd be like, better not mess things up again, Bianca, better not do this, better not do that. You better have different friends. And so I didn't have any friends for a long time after that because I really did have to cut off those people. I love being around people and talking, and I didn't have that because I didn't have anyone close to me or anyone that was really for me. And this is a last opportunity for many times. You don't get this put on your record when you go through this process. Teen court overall affected me in the way that I really view drugs and alcohol now. If I had to give any advice for the next kid going through teen court, it would be to just be respectful and really listen during the classes, because some of these skills will help you throughout life, not even just in the present, in the future too, which is really important, especially because I'm a really future-oriented person. For anyone who's a big partier, I'd say yeah, still go to parties and stuff if you really want to and if you like that environment, because some people do, but you don't need to participate in all the drugs and alcohol. Maybe just hang out with a couple friends that are good influences on you. Teen court transformed my life.
So with that, I'm more than happy to turn it over for any questions you may have. And once again, thank you guys for coming tonight and joining us for this and listening to me talk at you about the Teen Court program. It really is effective. You really can see the kids change. And at some point before we end tonight, I'd love for my volunteers who were here, which thank you again, by the way, I'd love for my volunteers to share why they keep coming back to Teen Court. I don't know where my Zoom box is, hold on.
Hey, Eric.
Yes.
So I just want to say that one thing that I noticed firsthand going through the peer panels that it warms my heart every time is I see the transformation of the defendant just during the peer panel activity, where the role models and the teen court teen volunteers really open up those kids, those defendants, where they can really have a positive interaction. And it's an incredible experience, to see that, see them blossom and talk and have just a wonderful interaction. And also for the mandatory condition for jury duty, I just wanted to talk about that. I can see that being a really important aspect too, of where they can see the criminal justice system in a positive light, being part of it, building that confidence, that self-esteem that you talked about. And I think it's just a phenomenal opportunity, just the teen court giving them that positive step in the right direction and in the criminal justice system. So I just wanted to talk about that real quick. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, no, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for being, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it just dawned on me that I forgot to mention that. Those kids that are sentenced at a trial that our student attorneys handle, the jury who decides the sentence is made up of all the kids who were sentenced within the last month, because we make them all come back and do one teen court jury duty at a trial. So the kids who've already been sentenced are the jury. They're the ones being given the opportunity to change the course of a kid's life, potentially life-changing. So I apologize that I failed to mention that earlier.
We have one question from Berkeley.
Yes, Bert.
Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
My question is teen court available for anybody under a teen age?
Under a teen age? So are you talking about, so the kids that are in the program, we see them as young as 10 to 19, and our student volunteers, they're all 13 to 18. Because in El Paso County, you can't get a ticket if you're under 10 years old. But,
okay.
Thank you. Good question. I have a question for Lydia and for Alex Wynn Lopez. Why did you guys volunteer with Teen Court for so many years?
Obviously because of you, Eric.
Oh, stop it. No, this isn't about me.
Well, for me, it all started out with, I was an incoming freshman and I'm an ROTC. I did ROTC in high school and now I'm a Navy ROTC in college. And I needed to fulfill my volunteer hours. So I went on Google right after 8th grade looking for what should I do with my summer. And then I found Teen Court and I'm like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. So then I went to meetings. I started with peer panel, like everyone does. You kind of have to do that before because you have to take classes to become a student attorney. And I just started like seeing so many like different kids doing things like, I had a girl, I think like one of my first cases, who stole a phone charger from she just like grabbed it out of a girl's hands, hit her and ran away. Like you don't imagine these things, but they do actually happen. And it honestly just made me more open-minded. And more I got involved, the more hours I started putting in, I started like seeing the people want to change. And I kind of just fell in love with that because like I got to talk as a defense, I got to talk to the parents and the kid. And I just got to like hear their story. Like, because so many times, like I did a research paper actually on restorative justice that Erick read before I submitted it, about how much, like you don't really think about restorative justice as this big thing until you're actually in it. I was gonna say that like you might think of a person who did a crime or shoplifted as, oh, they just wanted to do that. But what if they wanted to buy their family a birthday gift? What if they were really like lacking money that month? There's so many more things that go into just being like that person that caused them to make that decision, which just made me fall in love with just like helping those people, which is why I might actually like continue. I'm like I said, freshman, studying international politics at George Washington. But I still want to continue maybe getting like a law degree in criminal justice or something like that, just because doing teen court really did leave such a big impact on my life because of the stories I heard, the background that I saw. It just completely changed the way that I see teens and just overall the justice system.
Thank you, Lydia. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, similar to Lydia, I kind of found it on the internet. I was kind of just looking around for volunteer experiences just out there. And I came across this teen court thing and I thought, you know what, I'll just do it on a whim. So me and my brother just went down, we tried it for one session and we both really enjoyed it. And we came back again and again and again. What really kept me coming back, similar to Lydia, was some of these stories that you hear. I mean, some of the things you can't make up. And you every week, you'd hear a crazier story and you think nothing will ever top this. And then next week you get surprised again. But beyond the fact that there were some insane crimes that were committed, you found the people behind these stories. You saw the situations they're going through, the dire situations they're living in. Very few of these students that I interacted with in the peer panels were the type of people who would wake up and say, all right, I'm going to go shoplift or I'm going to go whatever. I was a teen once, incredibly enough, and we didn't make dumb mistakes. You know, it happens, and it's a matter of just these kids. Some of them not necessarily have the structure in order to realize what the right decision is, or may not have the support structure to say you can make the right decision. You have the ability to. Some of these kids just need that little push, and that will allow them to turn their life completely around. And I've seen that on multiple occasions.
Thank you, Alex. And lastly, real quick, Alex Choi, why do you keep coming back to teen court?
Yeah, so it's really similar to what everybody has said. I don't really have too much to add, but I will say that it's really eye-opening to me because as a teen volunteer, what you wish is when you first see someone, you wish it's the last time that you see them because you don't want to see them again in teen court, and so you don't really see the end result of what you're doing and the work you're putting in. And I remember going back to volunteer one day, and I actually met someone that I was a peer panel for, and I talked to them about, why did you come back here of all places? And they just said that it was really helpful for them, and it was an eye-opening experience, and they wanted to provide it for someone else, and so that was what brought them back. And I just was, it was marvelous. It was incredible for me, and that's just what brings me back every day. That hopes that I can impact someone that to make them change.
Thank you, Alex. Well, like I said, the volunteers are the lifeblood of this organization. If you're 13 or older, you could be a student volunteer. If you're in high school, you're eligible to become a student attorney. And if you're an adult, 18 or older, you can volunteer as a case manager to oversee your own peer panels. You can volunteer in our life skills class to help with those interviews. If you want to help, I'm sure I can find a place for you to help. All you need to do is either call our office or email me, and I would be more than happy to find a good fit for you. So I just want to say thank you to Drace and Shanna and Regina. Thank you guys so much for inviting me to be a part of this. This is awesome. I got to say, I've done plenty of Zooms, but not where I'm the one with the PowerPoint. So that was kind of a new experience for me, but I'm glad to have been here, and I hope you guys learned something about restorative justice and social justice. And I would love to have some more teen court volunteers, especially you students, because every year they go off to college and they leave me here and the cycle starts all over again. So
it's part of the process, right? Grow them up, send them out. Does anyone have any other questions before I go ahead and close out? And thank you all so much for your patience. I know we're just a little bit over, but I think we've had some great content, but I don't want to cut any conversation or question off. So does anyone else have any other questions for Erick or his team before I close out?
Erick, I just wanted to say that you and your team did a fantastic job. I think that it answered a lot of questions that our youth are concerned about and the challenges. And when we start thinking about this in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is a way to be inclusive, that it doesn't have to be one way because it doesn't just fit one model or one group of people, and that you all have figured out a way that we can address the unique needs of individual people. So I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Regina. You nailed it right there on the nose. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Regina. I think that's such an important point that you brought up. So if there's no other questions, then I'm going to go ahead and close out. So Erick, thank you so much. And I also want to thank your special guests, Andrew, Lydia, and Alex. So thank you guys so much for taking your time to share about your experience and even for your contribution here in our community. We really appreciate and love when the young people and the teens are involved. So that's great.